Hello everyone. So I'm starting off this podcast slash YouTube video ideas by Late Night Talks, and my first guest is Kaven, and I could never have imagined a better guest than Kaven actually. And today, do you want to introduce yourself actually?
Well, I guess my name's Kevin. I'm from Malaysia. I'm 24 years old. I also study here at the university, and I'm 24 this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So today we're gonna start off talking about social media and how social media affecting our feelings, and it's gonna be following that topic in general. So enjoy the conversation. So, David, what do you think about social media in general? Because we talked about this before.
I feel like I spend a lot of time on social media. Like, in these past few months, I don't feel like I've been the most productive. And I think a lot of people can relate with that. I'm in my 7th semester, so the fact that I'm in the 7th semester kind of says a lot about the fact that I haven't really been keeping myself productive or to the level that should have gotten me, done with my uni within 6 semesters, which is the norm here at Jacobs. I don't know, it's just that I feel like the moment I wake up, I'm on social media, and when I'm not doing anything, I'm on social media. If I'm eating lunch and while I'm eating, I'm watching something on TikTok, or I'm just scrolling through Instagram, and sometimes it feels a little repetitive because I'm looking at the same shit all the time, and it's not like the same thing that I'm looking at is bringing me any kind of satisfaction, but it's just this mind-numbing thing that I do. I obviously think that social media has a lot of positives, like, exposure, businesses, just networking, connecting with people, and then connecting yourself with the world out there, and then educating yourself. Yeah, I feel like TikTok is probably one of those things where you get to see people in the flesh as realistically as they can portray themselves, because the level of filtering is so minimized, because you're literally just looking at a person the way they are through their phones, through their camera. And through TikTok itself, I've educated myself on a lot of different things. I think one of the most important things about TikTok is that it exposes you to different communities, different cultures. One of the first things that became a huge phenomenon on TikTok was this thing with indigenous cultures. And with throat singing, and with like Inuit culture and stuff like that. And one of the first things that I learned that I otherwise wouldn't have learned if not for TikTok was the fact that the term Eskimo, for example, is offensive, because yeah, Eskimo is basically just like an overarching term. It's as if you called someone like, oh, he's African, but you're not sort of considering the fact that he might be from a specific country in Africa, for example, like he's Ethiopian or Moroccan. You're sort of, so like in the same way that you're calling someone Asian, Indians are Asians, Pakistanis are Asians, Malaysians, Chinese people, they're all Asians. But like Eskimos is also sort of, it's more offensive in the sense that like there is no platform where people speak of them or acknowledge their cultures, and so they're very much hidden behind the scenes. And these different tribes, these different indigenous tribes, they aren't big enough, or their presence isn't felt enough in the form of a country or a state, for example, and so like they tend to go sort of unseen. And so I learned about how the word Inuk is the singular for a person of that tribe, and Inuit is the plural word for a person of that tribe. So it's just stuff like that, and then exposure on like different foods that people eat, and just things that people do in their culture that might not seem common to us.
Yeah, definitely.
And another thing I really like about TikTok is how it exposes us also to like the diversity that exists in this world.
Yeah.
There are a lot of mixed kids, for example, on TikTok. Like, so you look at how people live their lives and how people identify with their mixed heritage, and you realize that some people are such a mix of different things that they can identify with different things, and they don't really have to fit into your box of what you think an Asian person is, or a white person is, or this and that, or American person. So obviously, yes, social media is good, but then there's also this side of social media being this mindless, robotic thing that you engage in on a daily basis.
I actually have 2 points. Like, I never really know the best side of the social media. I mean, I experience the good sides of social media also following these kind of pages, but not everyone is like encountering these pages. And you were mentioning like how it's unfiltered in TikTok, and I'm not sure if it's actually unfiltered because not only on TikTok but Instagram and generally social media actually, for instance, create a lot of like body negativity in other people, etc. because there's a lot of filters using and Photoshop going on. Even on TikTok, like I've seen people like, you know, not only using filters but also shaping their body and etc. And what do you think about this part of the social media in general? Because I on my own had body problems just because I was looking at the social media a lot. And you know, like when I found out that these pictures are like photoshopped, like at first I couldn't believe it, and now I feel like every picture I've seen, it's not even real.
Well, obviously I haven't really done a lot of reading into this type of stuff, but my initial feeling while we're talking about it right now is that like for decades before the internet, like media has always been sort of controlled by, you know, these huge media outlets, these corporate, you know, entities, and obviously in order to market something they need to make you believe that certain things are appealing. So they sell like hypersexualized images of women, or they sell you this fear that you have to somehow fit into this perfection. And obviously on social media we see sort of like this leftover legacy of that, and it still exists because the people who were brought up with all that propaganda stuff, telling you your body has to be this way, you should look this way, that is still around because the people who were sort of brought up with that, and the people who were conditioned through those lines, they are still around and they still play by those rules. And when you have this type of thing still sort of like floating around in the air, you're going to have the younger generation be influenced by that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is going away necessarily soon, because no matter what, we're all still kind of attuned towards that. We're all still looking at social media and looking at, oh my god, this girl has amazing skin, she's got like an amazing body, or like look at this guy's abs. Like we're always gonna be drawn to that.
Yeah, and we're actively contributing to it as well.
Because we're conditioned to be drawn to that. Like that is the only thing we know is perfection, or that is the only thing we know is the ideal. That's definitely a negative, but I think the good thing about the internet is that now you can sort of fine-tune what your ideal is. So I would say that growing up, there's always been like a lot of white or European representation, and obviously our ideal of what is beautiful and what is perfect, or what types of body types to sort of strive towards, it's all sort of conditioned by the people we see on screen mostly. But I feel like with the internet, if you put effort into breaking away from those norms.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have that, the thing with norms is that you can be comfortable with them and you can live your entire life adhering to those norms and be very happy and be very content.
Yeah.
And that is the issue, because then you don't really step out of your comfort zone to find something appealing that you might not already be taught was appealing. So it falls into the hands of every individual. This responsibility of unconditioning yourself or undoing the conditioning and looking towards things that aren't necessarily marketed as being attractive. Mm-hmm. But obviously that type of stuff is occurring more and more in mainstream media.
Yeah.
You see models of different body sizes, you see models of different skin colors, you see that there's an increased diversity in what is now put up as the ideal.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
So I think it's sort of up to you to accept whether or not that is attractive or that is the ideal. Because no matter how much these fashion brands or these perfume brands, they put people up on screen who are a little bit diverse and who kind of like step outside of your realm of expectation of what you find attractive. If you yourself are not ready to accept that that is attractive, you will never find that attractive, no matter how much diversity they put to you on screen.
I was actually going to ask, for instance, if a brand advertises on their social media about like different colors of people and different size of people, would you like feel more comfortable buying their products, or like does it matter to you that like if they're using this type of people and everything? Because I think you're a person that actually gives importance, like really like diversity and everything, and you consider this in a lot of aspects of your life. Mm-hmm. So if the advertisements on social media like affects your opinion about the product itself.
100%. I feel like it does affect me. But then you also have to consider the fact that me and you were not the typical consumer. You know what I mean? We got to go to university. We got to get a higher education. We got to travel to a faraway country. We're in Europe. We're forced to sort of learn things more quickly than a lot of people do back home. The other day I had a conversation with a friend from back home, and I talked to him about like the fluidity of a person's sexuality, and he was completely taken aback by it. He was like, "You do you, but I'm not going to judge." But that just goes to show that like no matter how much you look at it, we are part of an intellectual elite, and we probably comprise of less than 20% of the entire human population. I would say a lot of people live in rural areas.
True. But do they have access to social media? That's also...
Yeah, exactly. So the accessibility of social media and the internet plays a lot into what they can be exposed to. But I would say that the average Malaysian will probably not appreciate diversity. So this type of stuff is not really catered towards them. And that's why, if you noticed, I don't know, as I was growing up, I've always felt that brands that were portrayed in my country had sort of like a more international feel to it. Mm-hmm. But then as I grew older, everything became sort of localized. They started using local models, they started using, people from your communities, and you start seeing more and more of localization. Like even with cartoons, for example, like we used to have cartoons that were directly taken from like American channels and stuff. We would watch like Disney Channel and Cartoon Network and stuff like that, and we would watch HBO and just shows directly from the States. Then over time they started localizing things. They started making local shows, or they started translating shows to fit into the expectations of the local community. And I feel like that says a lot about the fact that there's a big reason why they did that. It's because they make a lot more money doing that. They make a lot more money fitting things into your reference, into your biases. And like a show like Glee, for example, where you know it talks a lot about like themes around uh, homosexuality, the LGBT community. That show was not popular in Malaysia, not that much, and there was a lot of censorship, and they took so much out of the show that you didn't even know what was going on already because they had to censor homosexual relationships, and so the fact is. I definitely respond in a positive way if somebody used an advertisement or they presented media to me with people of different backgrounds, of different sexual orientations. Like that would appeal to me because I belong to this international community. Yeah. You know, but it wouldn't really appeal to someone from back home who's a little bit more conservative than I am.
Another question comes up to my mind actually now that like before coming to an international like place and like moving abroad Malaysia, do you think social media influence you in a way that you know everything out there sort of? Because without it you wouldn't be able to really know if only shows they were showing was Malaysian shows and everything. Yeah. But with the current like Instagram, I guess TikTok wasn't a thing like 4 years ago, but these kind of situations, like maybe it actually has a positive effect because you see the world like around you, even though you're not there, sort of.
I feel like it plays a role for sure, because it normalizes things. It makes things that are different to you feel not so different. It makes things that are different to you feel like, oh, this is normal. But I think you don't get to a point where you're accepting of this thing, especially if you have your own biases, without the help of education. Obviously, you need to go through sort of like the right processes to sort of frame your mind in such a way where you see something and you are ready to accept that that is a norm, that is what everybody else is doing, or that is, okay. I mean, I have a lot of friends from back home who are very conservative, and if you showed them anything that was a little bit more liberal or a little bit more, um, open-minded, they would be like, I know this is going on, but this doesn't apply to me, so I'm just gonna let that happen. But it's not happening to me or my friends or people around me. So there is that awareness, but there's not an acceptance of the fact that it is a norm. And there's no acceptance that this norm might even permeate into my own community because most of the time they keep it outside of their door. They don't let it in.
True.
But I would say that the more we push for, so like you can always have diversity and representation up here, but with this amount of representation, maybe this amount of people will normalize that, but then as this goes up as well. Yeah. It might be at a significantly lower level, but it goes up nonetheless. And I would say that there are a lot of very open-minded, very progressive youth in Malaysia as well. And obviously most of them live in the cities because we enjoy a lot more diversity in the cities. We have a lot of expats studying in local schools and stuff, and kids have that type of exposure. I honestly have never met a foreigner until I went to an international school to do my IB. And so it wasn't even that hard for me to just sort of humanize them in my head. All these stereotypes that people had about other people from different countries, they just didn't mean anything to me anymore because I've finally met my first Arab, I finally met my first Pakistani, my first Indian. I finally met people, that I never thought I would meet. And I think that's the most effective way of undoing prejudices.
Definitely.
That you have in your head. You just have to meet a person, and these prejudices that you have of a specific group just sort of disappears, and you no longer speak in those prejudices or those stereotypes anymore because you realize that they don't apply in any way.
Yeah, I agree. And to coming up to another aspect of social media, actually, because we've been talking about this fear of missing out and seeing other people enjoying their life while you are maybe in a set position or you have to do work. Like, how do you feel about this in general? Because for me, like, I have a lot of like instances that, like, if I'm not going out on a Friday night, I would delete Instagram for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I really need to be productive, like I have like I feel like I have to delete the Instagram so that I don't constantly go on my phone and check what others are doing on a Friday night.
Right.
So how do you feel about that? Because I know that you're also working on weekends and everything. So
I think with that sort of stuff, with this whole fear of missing out, this idea, I feel like you really need to look at your own privilege because um, the fact is some people just can't afford to go out on a Friday night even if they had the time. You know, I used to be, so when I came here, I think my mom put together some money for me and I was supposed to find a job here, but when I landed here, I had maybe like 400 euros, if I remember correctly, 400 euros pocket money, and I had to spend that for an entire semester because I wasn't making any money. I made a lot of friends, you know, like it wasn't that like I didn't make any friends or whatever, but like I had a lot of friends who wanted to go out on the weekends to go eat and stuff. And at that point, I wasn't sure if I should tell them like, oh, I just can't because I can't afford it. So I would make excuses and be like, yeah, I have work, but I really don't. I just stay in my room and watch some YouTube videos or whatever. Um, so I never started out with that idea that I had a fear of missing out because otherwise I would be there with them. I never had that thing built up in my head that I could even be there with them. You know, I always told myself that like this is the life that I live. Like I don't have this privilege. But obviously that changed a lot. And after you know, working two jobs and finding myself here and just like finding my own financial, you know, standing here while at Jacobs, and when I started being able to afford going out and stuff, for the first year, I was working in January of 2019. I was working at Paddy's, which is an Irish pub in Bremen. And I worked there on the weekends, so Fridays and Saturday nights. And Fridays and Saturday nights are usually when people go out, you know. But I never really thought of myself as being able to participate yet at that point. And to be quite frank, you know, I was with a group of friends that I didn't really like all that much. A lot of them were quite sort of like childish, and they would make really inappropriate jokes, and it was a point in my life where I was trying so hard to fit in um, into this European world, coming from Asia and having been brought up in Asia, that I let a lot of problematic things sort of slide. Like I had friends who were making racial jokes, and I was like, "Ah, that's funny," and I would laugh along with them. But you can tell just from my description that like there was a desire to fit in more than I had a desire to just make myself feel comfortable or understand who I was. I just went along with what people did, and I just became who they wanted me to become. But I also didn't really like them that much. So I was kind of conflicted because I knew some of the stuff that they were saying or doing were kind of wrong, but I don't have a choice. Because if I told them that, you know, I didn't agree with what they were doing, I just wouldn't have any friends at all. But I had a lot of pride for, you know, the fact that I was not someone that people could say bad things about. I work on the weekends. People always say good things about me. People always say like he's so hardworking. He's given up his weekends. He's, you know, so that pride sort of became the main driving force of my motivation to continue going to work. I think in my third year mostly when I started becoming more financially capable because I was working 2 jobs at that point.
So you said that you didn't have anything that people would talk shit about you, right?
Right.
But I think, especially with social media and the college life, even though you don't have like something to talk shit about, people can judge you like according to your social media pictures or generally like how they see you in college. So would it mean that if somebody is like, for instance, especially like since we're talking about social media, is saying that like I don't know, like I don't deserve anything, blah blah blah, does it really mean that I don't deserve anything? Because I'm also like, personally, even though I don't want to, I take a lot of people's opinion even though they are not even important to me. So that's why I've been always be afraid of like doing YouTube in general, like, you know, creating videos, like uploading more pictures, because I was always afraid of being judged by people. So when you mentioned that, like, okay, but at that point I didn't have like, you know, anything that people would talk shit about me, like, does it really mean that if you don't have anything like bad, you know, for like other people, would they still not talking about you and everything?
So you're saying that because people didn't have bad things to say about me, does that mean that they wouldn't say bad things about me? What is the question?
Sorry, like so you're claiming, for instance, that like, yeah, but at that point, like, I was doing good, that, you know, I had my own, like, you know, job, I was sustaining myself and everything. So my friend group should not be saying anything bad about me. You know, even though they're probably bad for me and, you know, in general. So what I was trying to say is that even though you're feeling like really good about yourself, would, like, is that mean that the people would not talk shit about you? Because even though like you are maybe the perfect person, people can like blame you for the stuff that you haven't done, especially in social media when everyone's life is perfect. Maybe they will judge you like, yeah, but you have so much privilege without knowing that what you're going through, you know?
Right. The way that I was talking about the fact that people so when I said that people looked up to me in that context, I meant that that became sort of like a motivating factor for me to continue working while also not really paying much mind to the fact that I was missing out on this huge social aspect of life on campus, right? But if we're talking about how people view me on social media and stuff like that, um, just specifically to my context, right? At that point I had not really put that much stuff out on social media, so I think it's an inevitable thing that like no matter what you are or no matter what you do, if you expose yourself to other human beings, they're going to talk to you in some way, you know, and when people say bad things about you, it's really just a reflection of things that they dislike about themselves that you remind them of, and then they make it sound like you're the one that's the thing that they hate, but it's really the stuff that's already in them that they see in you, and then they make you sort of bear the burden of bringing that thing about themselves out, you know. And I've definitely experienced a lot of instances where people would talk shit about other people, but then when you meet them in person, it's like, I have very, very exceedingly good feelings about this person. No matter what you say about them, like, I've not felt that in any way. And so, the complicated thing about human beings is that, like, we aren't one thing. We're not a constant thing, you know. And how you might appear to me depends on the relationship that I have with you. And the relationship that I have with you cannot be duplicated with anybody else, you know. And that's something a lot of people tend to not think about, and they oftentimes take the words of other people about other people.
Yeah.
So that's what it's easier for me to listen to rumors about you if I don't know you personally, and that's just the fact. And I've met a lot of people later on in life who knew me before or knew of me before, never really spoke to me. And it's an interesting thing when you're sitting around with friends and you're drinking with them. It's an interesting thing to ask them, what was your first impression of me? And then you hear about things that they thought that you were before having met you, and you realize that it's just based off of what other people have told them.
Definitely. And I think like the social media especially like really affects this in general.
So I think the fear of missing out thing, going back to it, like I don't personally feel that much of a fear of missing out, because I always know that, or like I would say that I've sort of boxed myself into a specific type of category where I feel like even if I see someone partying in a club, I told myself specifically that I'm not like a clubbing type of guy, so I wouldn't even enjoy being in that situation anyway, so I don't feel like I'm missing out. But if it's like a wholesome sort of like dinner and everyone's sitting around drinking and, you know, having a really deep conversation, and that would make me feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah, like I think like what makes us missing out is that what we want at that moment and what we cannot have. Like for me, I think like fear of missing out was a huge part of my semester, because sometimes I didn't even want to like go to like clubs and stuff, and I see all my friends are going, so I was like a bit pressured because I did not want to feel like left out in general. But later on I realized like it's not the case, you know. It's not that like people are leaving me out, it's just they want to party maybe that day and I don't. But for me, like especially because like this semester specifically, I started using a lot of like social media and on my phone like 5-6 hours, like, you know, unbelievable hours. Like my day is 24 hours, like how in a day that I'm like looking WhatsApp, like other, like, you know, Snapchat, whatever, Instagram, and that affected my mental health in a way that like, yeah, like I have to be there no matter what. Right. And I even though I know all of this idea because I'm capable of doing this talk, because so I'm aware of my feelings and I'm aware of my behavior, it was so hard to prevent. So some days, for instance, like today and yesterday, like again, like I didn't want to look at the Instagram, but if the application is on my phone, I will go and check it for sure. So what I usually do in those circumstances is just like deleting the app for a day. I don't know, opening it for 15 minutes and deleting back again. So that's the solution I came up with. I don't know how useful it is because I feel like I should have the self-control not to check the social media accounts whenever I'm on my phone. And also like another aspect, like, you know, when friends gather, like when they meet up, they look at their phones, right? How do you feel about that? Because I know that I do this sometimes as well, unintentionally maybe. But I know that it also makes me feel weird if I'm like in the middle of conversation. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, when you're talking to someone and they just keep looking at their phone, like, you can't help but feel like they're not really focusing, they're not really paying attention, and there's something more important than this conversation and this engagement, this interaction that you're having with them. There's something out there that's more important than this card interaction. Obviously it's going to make you feel bad, and so by extension I feel like maybe that might encourage you to not look at your phone as often when you're talking to someone. I feel like within my circles, it's fair to look at your phone to reply a text or two when you're in a group setting. But if you're doing a one-on-one, I usually don't take my phone out, but what I would do is normally if we've had like a hour talk, and I'm like, okay, give me a minute, let me check my phone because it's been ringing. And then we do like a 5-minute break and then we go back to the conversation. I don't like looking at the phone while someone's talking. I'd rather stop them and say, look, I need to look at my phone right now, let's have a break. Because maybe it's just me, I don't know if this applies to everyone, but I can't really focus on the conversation if I'm looking at the phone. Yeah. So sometimes when people tell me, give me a minute, I'm listening to you, but I'm also going to be looking at my phone, a part of me is like, I don't really believe that you're listening to me right now, but because they told me to continue, I'll just continue. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's it for today. because I think we've reached like 30 minutes already. So thank you for coming.
No problem.
I hope we can do another one like later on. And I hope I can actually edit this and everything, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope you guys enjoy this video / podcast. And have a great day and use the social media in a positive way. Most of the times at least. Bye!